Hello and welcome to another lesson on policy, procedures, standards, and guidelines. This is module 1.6 out of the Common Body of Knowledge. So let's get right into it. What is policy? Policy is very high level, and it basically outlines the strategic goals of your organization or the organization. And some of the things you might see in a policy would be things like data classification, access management, user behavior, or some personnel security practices. Things like data classification could be you have 3 confidential, sensitive, and public information. Access management could be some general rules about how to protect your password or things like that, or just the requirement to protect your password. User behavior, it kind of gets into the expectations of how your users interact with your systems. And personnel security practices could be something like we conduct background checks on all of our employees. So I like to think of it as a holy book, because you have these holy books around the world for all the various religions, and they kind of give you a high-level guideline of how you should live your life. They don't really get into the nitty-gritties. Maybe some of them do. But here is an example. If you have a policy, your policy would say, for encryption, your policy would say, encrypt stuff. It would be very high level. It wouldn't get any more granular than that. CISSP gives us a policy process. And the policy process is that you have a subject matter expert who writes the policy or who drafts the policy. And that policy draft will go to other SMEs and business areas and experts who then provide some edits. And then those edits will eventually get wrapped up and sent over to senior management for final approval. Standards are a little bit more granular than policy, and your standards can come from law, whether it's regulatory law or administrative law from a judge. They can come from professional organizations such as CISSP, or they can also come from industry groups such as the PCI or the Payment Card Industry Group. And standards contain expectations or settings, and an example here would be going with the previous encryption policy. If you turned that into a standard or furthered that down into a standard, then your standard would say encrypt stuff at AES, or Advanced Encryption Standard, using 128-bit key length. All right, so what is a guideline? A guideline is basically a recommendation, or it's a suggestion, and it's not required. And I am doing these in order of their hierarchy, by the way, so if you were curious about that. Policy comes first, standards next, and then guidelines, and then procedures. So guidelines are not required. And the best way to think of this would be a road sign that you see. I think this is worldwide, but mostly here in the U.S. maybe, that you see these orange signs that say 40 miles an hour. Those are not actually legal standards. That's a guideline. It's a warning saying you should go 40 miles an hour around this corner, but it's not required. You're not going to get pulled over if you go above that. So if we turn to the encryption thing, if we further the encryption line of thought into a guideline, our guideline would say, encrypt stuff using WinZip. Of course, you don't have to use WinZip. That's just one piece of software that you can use to encrypt things. You can also use 7-Zip, or you can use a number of other different softwares that are out there to encrypt something. So, what is a procedure? A procedure is a specific task. So it's repeatable and it's step by step. So and these can be product specific or technology specific. And the best way to think of this is like a tutorial. You go on YouTube and you type in how to do something, and you'll get a step-by-step process based on whatever it is that you search. So if we were to continue with our encryption example here, we could say the procedure is to encrypt stuff using WinZip. You're going to click here, you're going to go there, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to put the file in there, and you're going to click AES, then you're going to click 128, and yada yada, so on and so forth. All right? So if you have trouble with this concept, you can memorize it by doing a little bit of a mnemonic here, and most of us probably don't need to, but this could help. And this is breaking it down to the very simplest term. you're going to say the phrase policy is approved or approved, right? So policy needs to be approved by executive management. It's the high level one. Standard is a setting. Standards, settings. Procedure is a process, and guidelines are good. So that's a very simple, easy way to memorize this if you need help doing that. So there are some related concepts that you should be familiar with, and be sure that you don't confuse these. Things like security frameworks. What's a framework? I think I have another video on frameworks. If not, then I will make one. I believe there's a whole other module that covers frameworks, but a framework is what you're going to use to actually create the policy. So the frameworks kind of go above and beyond. Not above and beyond, but they shape the if you combine those with your organizational goals, they will shape your policy, is what I was trying to say. Security baselines. These are basically your minimum security settings that you want to have. And the same concept is configuration management. So security baseline and configuration management are the same thing. So these might come up when you're studying the material or when you're taking practice tests or whatever. A question that might try to confuse you would be something throwing frameworks in there or baselines or configuration management into a policy question or a procedure or a standard question. And there's also this thing called change management. It's easy to get all these confused and kind of commingled in your mind with the policy and the standard and the procedure concept. So make sure that you understand these concepts fully, because I believe this is a big part of the Domain 1 content. As always, thanks for watching. If you want to take some really good practice questions, head on over to CISSprep.net and sign up. And hope you have a great day. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.